Welcome to the Asylum, the #1 place for your toy and collectible fix. Receive the help you need only at the Asylum. We hope you enjoy your visit. Yes.
And welcome to episode 3 of the Asylum Show. This is Mike, Facilities Manager of the Asylum, and your host. Now I'm trying something a little different this week. I've not had a lot of free time to set up and shoot any live sections, so I'll be here in voice only, and the show will be a little shorter than usual. Now there's a few things I want to cover in this episode, so I'm going to jump straight into the Asylum Showcase, where I'll be taking a look at some of my recent personal and stock pickups. Unfortunately, I don't get a lot of time to get out on the hunt these days, but I make a conscious effort to do so when I can. This isn't because I don't want to, the hunt is actually my favourite part of collecting. The biggest setback for me is my geographical location and lack of places near me that I can actually go without travelling for miles. Now my prime responsibility is taking care of the Asylum patrons, meaning I can't be away from the grounds for too long. But on that note, when I can get away, I do. And here are some of the pieces I've found recently. Starting off with these Infinity figures of Sabine Wren and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Since the discontinuation of this line was announced not that long ago, I jumped on these as soon as they hit clearance. Now with many stores still getting in new shipments, it's been a nice and easy collection to grow. At £2 to £3 a figure, they really are the best value collectible out right now, in my opinion. Next up we have Quail Dog from the Disney Nickelodeon Doug cartoon. I loved Doug back in the Nickelodeon heyday, and he may even be partly responsible for my sneaker collection consisting of over 100 pairs, which I'll do a showcase on in the near future. Toys from these properties in this era are very rare to come by, and I'll be honest, I wasn't even aware that Doug toys existed, so I couldn't leave him behind. Okay, so Gamorrean Guard has turned up again. Twice in fact. Now the little guy is possibly the smallest Gamorrean Guard I've ever seen that wasn't manufactured for a Micro Machines line. And as you can see, he is official and has the Lucasfilm stamp and production year on the bottom of the figure. It was obvious the moment I saw him he was coming home with me. Now I also managed to pick up a nice condition 3 3/4 inch Gamorrean Guard, with his axe, which I've never owned loose, so I'm very happy with him. He will be my official number 2 and the start of my Gamorrean army. More news on that in a future episode. Now of course the vintage Boba Fett had to be picked up. He's a 79 Taiwan, just in case you're wondering, and not much more needs to be said. He's Boba Fett. So let's carry on. I found this nice 3 3/4 inch General Grievous loose, so he also had to come with me. Even though he's one of my favourite characters from the prequels alongside Darth Maul, I haven't actually had a Grievous figure in this scale before. I have the Unleashed figure of him, I've got his Lego Attack Cycle, the Transforming Grievous, and even the Lego Buildable figure as mentioned in the last episode, but not the standard one, so I was really happy to find him also. After my UK toy industry rant, imagine my surprise to pick up the 40th anniversary 6-inch Obi-Wan Kenobi from my local Toys R Us. I won't be picking up the whole wave, as I'd love to keep them on the card and just don't have the space to do that. However, he will look great alongside my Darth Vader as part of my original trilogy display. Last but not least, I picked up this little guy called Magma from the Arty Toys line. He's a 3-inch vinyl figure, most comparable to Kid Robot's minis. They have a lot of similar design cues and don't have the hindrance of blind packaging. I love the design of Magma, and the $6.99 price point in my opinion is very good value for such an obscure piece. And that about wraps things up for my personal pickups. Next up, I'm going to look at some stock pieces. Now these will be coming to thecollectorsasylum.com in the next few days. I won't give you a full breakdown like my personal pieces, just a quick visual run through. If you see anything you're interested in, be sure to keep an eye on our Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, as all new stock additions are shared on there before anywhere else. Coming up, we've got Rec Room Discussion, the topic of this being 2016's Ghostbusters. Now I'm a little late to the conversation on this one as I wasn't massively interested in the reboot. I had nothing against it, it's just the trailers did nothing to impress me. Now I have to say I actually really enjoyed Ghostbusters. It wasn't the nostalgia trip I would have liked, but that's not a bad thing. It was actually quite refreshing how much it set itself apart from the original installments. It starts off very well and had me laughing out loud a lot more than I expected. It's not the most inspired screenplay in the world, but it's fun nonetheless. Now before I carry on, this is a forewarning that I will be stepping into minor spoiler territory. If you still haven't seen it and don't want it spoiled, feel free to mute your device until the spoiler warning disappears, or jump forward to the time signature you see on the screen now. Okay, here goes. Now the first act is amazing. It's full of gags, well paced, and the two ghosts we encounter at the beginning are very good, in particular the subway ghost, who I wish we'd gotten an action figure for. It's when we get to the second act and Bill Murray's character turns up that we start to hit speed bumps. Now don't get me wrong, the cameos are welcome, but they feel really misused and badly affect pacing. In fact, it's after this point you can really feel the narrative takes a dive and the jokes start to miss the mark. Now, I feel more focus should have been allocated to the character's development to give the movie better grounding, and spend less time trying to achieve cheap laughs. We have no attachment to the characters throughout the movie, and they're also similar in personality and how they're written, that you could literally interchange almost any of their dialogue and no one would be the wiser. I think this predominantly boils down to the movie not really knowing who it's for. A lot of the themes and humour seem to be aimed at adults, contradictory to the aesthetic and plot which is aimed at children. In my opinion, the best example of this is the mannequin scene. It starts out genuinely quite scary with undertones of horror and creates some real tension, which is then immediately ruined by a bright green dragon emerging from it to set up a gag 2 minutes later. Great for kids who have just crapped their pants over the mannequin scene, not so good for the adult viewers who, like me, were let down by the thematic switch. In regard to the final showdown, it just feels like a massive free-for-all, with the setups feeling no more inventive than pixels. It's like someone made a list and simply shot it bullet point by bullet point, leaving out any narrative whatsoever in between each set piece. Now I understand that Sony wanted to appeal to a wider audience, but instead of a well-executed movie for all ages like we see from the likes of Pixar and other studios, we unfortunately received the definition of an incoherent and underdeveloped reboot. I think it's a genuine shame that we probably won't see a sequel to this now. I have a feeling that we may have seen a much better second instalment from the cast, and if the studio took on board viewer and fan feedback, especially given the post-credits scene with the hint of Zool showing up in the next movie, similar to how Batman Begins teases Joker. As I said at the beginning, I actually really enjoyed Ghostbusters. It definitely has its issues, but isn't terrible, and definitely didn't deserve the pre-release blasting that it received. It's simply a mindless piece where I was able to shut off my brain for the duration and ride with it. We need movies like this in our viewing rotation, and for that alone, I suggest giving it a go. I didn't want to dissect the entire movie, just convey my general thoughts on it. Do you agree with me? Do you think I missed out anything that needed to be touched on? Or do you think I'm completely off the mark? I'd love to know, so feel free to share your opinion tastefully in the comments below. Moving forward, we'll be taking a closer look at Hasbro's Transformers The Last Night Premier Edition Grimlock. Now a quick disclaimer before I carry on, I'm not the most knowledgeable when it comes to Transformers, but I love them for what they are. To me, a Transformer is the culmination of brand legacy, the height of toy engineering, and the old adage of more than meets the eye. So I'm looking at this toy entirely from an aesthetic, value for money, and play value perspective. Now I wanted to take a closer look at Grimlock in particular, as he is a character I've wanted to represent in my collection for quite some time. And it seemed only right to choose this interpretation given the movie's release edging closer. With that said, let's jump in. Here he is in his packaging. Now Grimlock jumped out at me the moment I saw him on the shelf. He's well presented in this clearly designed window box, which looks great under the bright lights of a retail environment, especially in unison with the other figures in this line. Unfortunately for me, upon unboxing him, it starts to go downhill. His robot mode leaves a lot to be desired, starting with its lack of functional articulation, and any that is present feels like it was an afterthought or simply coincidental to the transformation. I have to admit the ankle pivot is a nice touch, but could have been executed better with a ball joint lower down the leg, as this isn't utilised in the dyno mode. My next issue is with the paint apps. Although the more earthy tones used for this figure when compared to the Age of Extinction counterpart look a lot better, I have to say with the limited palette used and the only real contrast being his eyes in both modes make him feel a little flat. Especially the lack of detail in his face, which has actually been sculpted quite nicely. My last complaint in robot mode is that the transformation feels incomplete. This is entirely based on his back, with his hollow legs, screws and rivets on show, a lower jaw bum, visible ports. The robot mode just feels like a soulless coincidence of its transformation rather than being a well thought out toy. I was happy to overlook these issues, as before unboxing him, I assumed I would display him in his alt mode just because it's Grimlock. Who doesn't want a robotic dinosaur sitting on their shelf terrorising the rest of their Transformers? Well, I have to unfortunately report that this, for me, wasn't much better. The transformation is a nice experience and probably my favourite aspect of this toy in terms of play value and engineering. But again, the colour scheme just doesn't quite work. It feels a little Frankenstein's monster culminating in a toy that looks like it's been cobbled together using parts that weren't meant for their designed purpose. His rear feels off kilter due to the choice of not hiding his head correctly, leaving him with a bell ring as back, and his underbelly is clearly the thighs of a robot. The head would have been much better if they left out the closing jaw action feature and simply made it posable. The ports in his tail don't like to stay together. The rib sections are awkward, which makes his arms feel disjointed, and he doesn't even have many posing options due to lack of any ankle articulation. This toy is genuinely making it difficult for me to find anything I like about it. So you're probably wondering why I'm going all in on it. It is what it is, at least we have it, and I would disagree. In my opinion, the price point of nearly £35 in its presentation put this firmly in the adult collector's market, and I just don't see the value. This isn't a new toy, it's an entirely reused sculpt that has simply been repainted. Either Hasbro didn't make their money back on the mould from its first release, or they did and are just being greedy. I feel its issues don't warrant the price point, and it's a good £8 above where it should be. Now, if you're a casual Transformers fan like me, I suggest leaving this one on the shelf and opting for an alternative. Of course, for the completist who will pick this up regardless, I would suggest waiting for it to hit clearance. There are loads of these out there, so I'm confident that being patient will help your wallet in the long run. And I'm afraid that's it for this episode. I hate to leave you on a negative note, but I believe honesty is the best policy. I hope you've enjoyed your visit. Please feel free to share your thoughts on anything discussed in the comments below. If you liked the episode, please be sure to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and be sure to hit the notification bell so you know when the next episode is available. I've been Mike, and I'll see you in the asylum soon.